Julia Lawrence sat in a custom wooden rocking chair on her mansion's ocean view porch in Cape Cod's upscale residential area, sighing as she listened to the waves with a glass of fine Chardonnay in hand. For years, she had served as an executive and recently as CEO of a real estate development company, navigating Wall Street's tumultuous waters and leading her company to new heights. Her skills were highly esteemed in the business world. However, since resigning as CEO last year, she had been living quietly in this mansion with her mother. Wrapped in an expensive cashmere shawl, Julia gazed at the Atlantic Ocean before her. The sound of the waves should have brought her comfort, and freed from the burdens of high-stakes decisions and negotiations, she should have been enjoying her time. Yet, her heart was as turbulent as the sea, occupied by thoughts of her mother, Eleanor, who had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. The onset came years ago when Eleanor's husband, Julia's father Tom, suddenly suffered a heart attack and passed away. The sudden loss devastated Julia and Eleanor. From that point, Eleanor's behavior began to change, starting with minor forgetfulness like not recalling Tom's favorite tea brand or mixing up the dates of their anniversaries. Everyone thought it was just confusion amidst grief. However, as days passed, the light faded from Eleanor's eyes. She would sometimes talk and set the dinner table as if Tom would return at any moment. Past and present melded within her, blurring the lines of reality. Julia felt powerless as her mother's memories vanished into the fog. Eleanor's smile remained, but it concealed deep confusion and anxiety. Despite her vast wealth, social status, and numerous achievements, none could lighten the burden on Julia's heart. As Eleanor's condition worsened, Julia acutely felt her own helplessness. She tilted her glass, taking a sip of the expensive wine, but even its taste felt hollow to her now. Suddenly, she fondly remembered cooking with her mother. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, and the kitchen was bathed in sunlight. Young Julia was baking an apple pie with Eleanor. With a gentle smile, Eleanor took Julia's small hands, teaching her how to roll the dough. "Like this, Julia." Gently, but firmly. Eleanor's warm voice echoed. "The pie crust needs to be handled with love. That way, it will surely turn out delicious." Julia, focused, rolled the dough and exchanged smiles with Eleanor as the aroma of butter and cinnamon filled the kitchen. "Mom, teach me how to cut the apples," young Julia pleaded. Eleanor patiently taught her how to peel and evenly slice the apples. Even when Julia made mistakes, Eleanor encouraged her gently, continuing their work together. Once the pie was in the oven, they sat by the window, waiting for it to bake. Eleanor stroked Julia's hair and shared memories related to cooking. "When I was little, Grandma taught me just like this," Eleanor reminisced. "Cooking is all about love. Making and enjoying it with someone you care about is the greatest happiness," she shared as the scent of the baking pie wafted through the air. Wrapped in the sweet aroma, Julia snuggled up to Eleanor, feeling content. When the pie was ready, they shared the hot apple pie with forks. At the first bite, Julia's face lit up. "Mom, it's so delicious." Eleanor smiled contentedly and kissed Julia on the cheek. "That's the taste of love." As Julia indulged in these warm memories, the front door opened, and Grace, Eleanor's caregiver, greeted her with a gentle smile. "Julia." "Oh, Grace, you're leaving already?" "Yes." Eleanor had a very good day today. She was looking at an old recipe book. Julia sighed with relief. "Thank you, Grace." She talked a lot about the past today, especially about memories in the kitchen when you were little. "Oh, I was just thinking about that too." Julia teared up, wondering if her mother was also thinking of the same memories. She headed to the living room, grateful that some memories remained in her mother. Eleanor was sitting in a rocking chair by the fireplace, appearing frail and somewhat shrunken, yet her eyes sparkled when Julia entered the room. "Julia," Eleanor smiled. "Mom, I love you." Julia sat next to her mother, gently holding her hand. Then Eleanor suddenly began recalling a memory. "Julia, do you remember that summer we spent at Grandma's house?" Julia smiled softly, holding her mother's hand. Yes, Mom. Eleanor squinted, trying to recall, and said. The kitchen was always so bright, and it smelled of lavender. Or was it rosemary? She frowned briefly in confusion, then continued. The light shone through the large window, making the counter sparkle. We often made jam. Was it blueberry? No, it was strawberry. Julia felt a deep love for her mother, who struggled to piece together her memories. You were so small then, trying to help us on the kitchen chair. But. Eleanor paused, looking puzzled, but Julia gently encouraged her. That's right, Mom. I often nearly fell off the chair. Eleanor's face brightened. Yes, that's right. I lifted you up and sat you down in a safe place. And then. She paused again, searching for words. Julia softly added. Just like you taught me, I was crushing the fruit. Ah, yes. You were diligently crushing the fruit with your tiny hands. It was so endearing. Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes. Julia, I can't remember the details, but I can't forget the happy feeling from that time. Mom, I remember too. The happy times of that summer. Those precious memories spent with you. As she listened to her mother recount memories of summers spent in the kitchen, the thought that these memories might one day fade tightened her chest. As the night deepened, Julia put her mother to bed. After Eleanor fell asleep, Julia sat alone in front of the living room fireplace. The flickering flames cast shadows on her face, accentuating the loneliness and anxiety reflected in her eyes. In her hands was an old photo with Eleanor. Her mother's once vivid smile seemed to fade into the distance of memory. Julia hugged the photo to her chest and sighed deeply. Julia, who had chosen career over marriage, had no regrets about her decision. However, the loneliness creeping into her heart now was a cold, heavy experience she had never faced before. As Alzheimer's progressed day by day, the confusion in her mother's eyes, the hesitation in her voice when she called her name, it all confronted Julia with an unavoidable reality. Julia looked outside the window. The lights of the city sparkled, but they felt distant, as if they could not reach her. In this vast world, the person who truly knew and understood her might soon be gone. This thought gripped her heart. If the day came when Eleanor completely forgot her, Julia would truly be alone. Who would she share her morning coffee with? With whom could she reminisce on lazy afternoons? Who would celebrate Christmas or birthdays with her? These trivial matters weighed heavily on her heart. Julia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The fear that her existence might vanish from this world enveloped her. If being remembered is a proof of existence, then disappearing from Eleanor's memory might mean losing a part of herself forever. However, even amidst this profound loneliness and fear, a flicker of hope stirred in Julia's heart. Tomorrow, and the day after, she would continue to be by her mother's side, pouring her love into every moment. Even if Eleanor forgot her, the love Julia held for her mother would never fade. This quiet resolve brought a slight warmth to her lonely night. As the night wore on, she walked toward the small beach behind her house. Staring at the moonlit waves, Julia aimlessly wandered, as if to chase away her anxieties. Suddenly, carried by the wind, a faint sound reached her ears. At first, it blended with the sound of the waves, but Julia's ears caught it distinctly. It was the sorrowful cry of a small creature. Her heartbeat quickened, and Julia slowly approached the source of the sound. Weaving between rocks scattered across the beach, she heard a faint sobbing from behind a large rock. Julia held her breath and peered behind the rock. There, she saw a small girl, curled up, trembling. Illuminated by the moonlight, the girl's figure seemed like a fleeting apparition. Her long hair covered her face, and her thin shoulders shivered. Her clothes, dirty and torn, clung to her bare, sandy feet. Julia's heart clenched painfully, feeling the fear and loneliness the child must be experiencing. Carefully, with as gentle a voice as possible, Julia spoke. "Are you okay? Don't be afraid." At her voice, the girl startled and curled up more tightly, but slowly, she lifted her face and looked up at Julia with wide, fearful eyes that also held a glimmer of hope. Julia spoke softly. I'm Julia. What's your name? Emily, the girl replied. Emily, why are you alone here? I got lost. She answered in a small voice. I see. But it's okay now. I'll help you find your home. Tentatively reaching out her hand, Emily took it after a moment of hesitation. Together, they walked along the beach to a nearby walkway. Julia looked around, but no home was in sight. Emily, where is your home? Julia asked. Emily shook her head. I don't know. I don't really have a home. Julia felt a rush of surprise and deep sympathy. What do you mean? Emily began to explain in a tiny voice. She had been moving from one foster home to another and had run away from her recent foster parents. Julia's heart ached. She could only imagine the suffering this little girl had endured, having no real home to call her own. Emily, spend the night at my house. Rest well, and we'll figure out what to do tomorrow. Julia suggested. Emily hesitated but eventually nodded. Julia lifted the girl and headed home. When they arrived, Grace was surprised but quickly understood the situation as Julia explained briefly. Grace began preparing a bath for Emily while Julia made a simple late-night meal, her thoughts swirling with this unexpected turn of events. After dinner, Emily quickly bathed and changed into the soft floral pajamas Julia had prepared. They might be a bit big, but just for tonight, okay? Thank you. Come on, Emily. I'll show you your room. Julia smiled gently and began to ascend the stairs to the second floor to guide Emily to the guest room. Emily followed Julia with small, hesitant footsteps, her face showing a bit of nervousness. As they walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the room at the end, Julia slowly opened the door. This is your room. Emily gasped. The room before her was more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Moonlight softly filtered through a large window, gently illuminating the entire room. In the center stood a large bed with cloud-like, soft white sheets. The pillows were plump, and the duvet looked warm, arranged as if to embrace her. Emily cautiously stepped into the room, feeling the soft carpet under her feet. Wow! She murmured softly. On the wall hung a painting of the sea, creating the illusion that one could hear the waves. On a small desk by the window, there was a cute seashell lamp. Julia gently placed her hand on Emily's shoulder. Do you like it? Emily, at a loss for words, could only nod. Joy and amazement shone in her large eyes. Try sitting on the bed. Julia encouraged gently. As Emily sat down, the soft mattress enveloped her small frame. She instinctively ran her hands over the sheets, her face lighting up in surprise at their smoothness. I've never had such a wonderful room. Emily said in a small voice, her tone a mix of disbelief and deep gratitude. Julia sat down beside her, smiling gently. This is your safe place. You can relax here as much as you like. Emily looked around, gradually feeling her tension ease. A small desk and chair were placed by the window, and a single flower had been arranged on the desk as a welcoming gesture. The closet door was slightly open, revealing towels and extra blankets. On the bedside table, a small reading lamp and a glass of water were discreetly placed. The room seemed to envelop Emily gently, and though it was her first visit, she felt an odd sense of comfort. Thank you, so much. Emily said, her eyes brimming with tears. Julia hugged her gently. Good night, Emily. Call me anytime if you need anything. With that, she left the room. Emily lay down on the bed, her head sinking into the soft pillow as she gazed at the ceiling in disbelief. Having her own room for the first time and being able to sleep in a safe, warm place filled her with deep joy and relief. That night, Emily was enveloped in a peaceful sleep unlike any she had experienced in a long time. Meanwhile, Julia headed to her own bedroom, deeply pondering the fate of this little girl. She would need to contact the appropriate authorities tomorrow. But at the same time, something was stirring in her heart. A strong urge to help Emily, whom she had just met that day, was beginning to take root within her. Julia spent a sleepless night. Emily's situation occupied her mind, and she kept thinking about what she could do for her. As dawn broke, Julia headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. When Grace arrived, Julia explained the events of the night. "Grace, we need to contact Child Welfare Services about Emily. But I can't bear the thought of sending her back to foster care immediately." Grace nodded sympathetically. "She's such a sweet child. It would be nice if there were a good solution." Just then, Emily entered the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and said in a small voice, "Good morning." Julia smiled warmly. "Good morning, Emily. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, very well." "That's good. Breakfast is ready. Would you like some pancakes?" Emily's eyes sparkled. "Yes. I love pancakes." As they ate breakfast, Julia listened to Emily's story. Her upbringing, her life in various foster homes, and the reasons she had run away. "I'm 10 years old. I don't really remember my real parents. I heard they both died in a car accident when I was 2. That so?" Julia gently held Emily's hand as she continued her story. "After that, I was taken in by a foster family. The first family was kind, but due to financial reasons, they had to let me go. Since then, I've moved from one family to another." Tears welled up in her eyes. "One family truly loved me as their own, but then the foster father got sick, and I had to move again." Emily choked up for a moment but gathered her courage to continue. But the last foster home was different. The foster father was an alcoholic, and the mother was indifferent. Every day was scary. Julia hugged her gently. "Emily, you've been through a lot. But you're safe now." Relieved, Emily nodded and took a deep breath before continuing. "One night, when the father was particularly violent, I got scared and ran away. I walked for days until I finally reached that beach. Until I met you, I was almost losing hope." With her story told, a look of relief appeared on Emily's face. Julia was deeply moved by her courage and strength. "Emily, you are a very strong girl." As Emily spoke, Julia's resolve solidified. After breakfast, Julia sat Emily down on the living room sofa and began to speak with a serious expression. "Emily, hearing your story makes me want to help you. But first, we need to follow the proper procedures." Emily looked anxious. "Are you going to send me back to a foster home or facility?" Julia gently took her hand. "No, that's not what I mean. I want to consider becoming your foster parent. However, that might take some time. Meanwhile, could you stay here with me?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Really? Can I stay here?" Julia nodded. "Yes, of course. But first, I need to contact Child Welfare Services to start the official procedures." "Don't worry, we'll get through this together." That afternoon, Julia promptly contacted Child Welfare Services and explained the situation. Thanks to her background and reputation, she was quickly recognized as a temporary guardian. However, becoming an official foster parent still required many procedures. As days passed, Emily began to feel at home in Julia's house. She seemed especially to enjoy her time with Eleanor. Eleanor strangely responded to Emily's presence, occasionally starting to recount memories of cooking. Emily was fascinated and happy listening to her. Emily sat on a small stool next to the large armchair where Eleanor sat. Between them lay an old cookbook. Emily's big eyes were fixed on the photos of recipes in the pages. When Emily exclaimed, "These cookies look delicious," Eleanor responded with a smile. "Ah, lemon cookies. They're one of my favorite recipes." Nostalgia appeared in her eyes. Emily leaned in with interest. "Grandma Eleanor, have you ever made them?" Eleanor's eyes gazed distantly as she began to recall. "Let's see. I was about 7 years old. Every Sunday afternoon, my mother would make these lemon cookies." Emily listened intently, each word sparking her imagination. The kitchen would be filled with the scent of lemons. Ah, I still remember that smell. I always helped my mother by rolling the dough with my little hands. Emily giggled softly. I wish I could have helped too. Yes, you would have been good at it, Eleanor replied. As Emily flipped through the cookbook pages, she kept asking questions. What about this pie? Oh, and this cake looks wonderful. Grandma Eleanor, which dessert did you like best? Eleanor squinted thoughtfully, then answered gently. They all bring back memories. But the special one is. She paused, searching her memory, and closed her eyes. Emily, unable to wait, gently touched Eleanor's arm. The special one is? Eleanor's eyes opened, and a warm smile spread across her face. Well, it must be the lemon cookies. They're full of memories of my mother. Emily thought quietly for a moment, then with a determined look, she said. Grandma Eleanor, then next time let's make lemon cookies together. That way, we can create new memories. Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes. She gently stroked Emily's head. That's a wonderful idea, Emily. It will surely taste the best. The two continued to share warm feelings as they looked through the cookbook. The living room was filled with the imaginary scent of lemons and the warm air of a new family bond forming. From a distance, Julia watched as her mother and Emily healed each other and created new memories, filled with deep joy and gratitude. That weekend, Emily and Julia began gathering ingredients under Eleanor's guidance. Julia hadn't seen her mother cook for many years, but Eleanor's hands moved skillfully, as if her memory was returning. Emily eagerly followed Eleanor's instructions, measuring flour and cracking eggs. Julia watched them, feeling warmth in her heart. In that moment, her home was again filled with vitality and joy. The sweet scent from the oven spread throughout the house. The aromas of butter and lemon intertwined, warming the very air. In the kitchen, Julia, with oven mitts in hand, carefully took out the cookies. The golden-baked cookies shone like little suns. They're ready, Julia called out softly. In the living room, Eleanor sat in the armchair, her face filled with anticipation, looking towards the kitchen. Emily, unable to sit still, eagerly awaited the arrival of the cookies. When Julia entered the living room with a large plate of cookies, the room was instantly filled with a sweet fragrance. Oh my! Eleanor exclaimed, her eyes wide with nostalgia. This scent, it's like going back in time. Emily clapped her small hands excitedly, unable to contain her excitement. Wow, they look really delicious. Julia smiled gently and handed out the cookies to the three of them. Emily bit into one immediately, her eyes widening in amazement. It's so delicious, she shouted, her mouth full. Eleanor slowly bit into a cookie and closed her eyes. Her expression softened as if she had wandered into a distant memory. Ah, it's just like my mother's taste. Julia watched the reactions of her mother and daughter as she savored her own cookie. The balance of sweetness and tartness was exquisite, melting delicately in her mouth. While eating, Emily gazed at Eleanor with sparkling eyes. Grandma Eleanor, tell me more about your old memories. A rare sparkle appeared in Eleanor's eyes as she began to speak softly. Well, eating these cookies always brings me back to those Sunday afternoons. We would all sit together and have tea. Julia felt a warmth in her chest as she watched her mother vividly recall the past. Emily listened intently, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. The three of them shared laughter and warm conversations while enjoying the cookies. Although Eleanor sometimes got confused with her memory stories, Emily and Julia gently guided her, keeping the conversation lively and enjoyable. Soft sunlight streamed through the window, gently enveloping the trio. In that moment, the room was transformed from a mere living room into a special space woven with love, memories, and new bonds. Emily, smiling happily, reached for another cookie. Her eyes were filled with a sense of security and joy. For this little girl, enjoying delicious cookies and warm family time was a blissfully new experience. That night, after tucking Emily into bed, Julia went to her mother's room. Eleanor was sitting by the window, staring out at the moon. "Mom, today was fun, wasn't it?" Julia said gently. Eleanor slowly turned to her daughter. "Yes, very much. That girl, Emily. She's special." Julia was surprised. It was rare for her mother to remember recent events so clearly. "Yes, she really is special." Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "You're special too, Julia. Trying to give that child a family. I'm proud of you." Tears welled up in Julia's eyes. Meaningful conversations like this had been rare since the Alzheimer's diagnosis. "Mom, thank you." Julia hugged her mother gently. "Since Emily came, the house has changed. It's like she's breathed new life into all of us." Eleanor nodded. Cooking brings back memories. The tastes, the scents, and the time spent with loved ones. They connect us. Julia was deeply moved by her mother's words. Although Eleanor's condition fluctuated, at that moment, she was remarkably lucid. The next morning, inspired by the previous day's events, Julia decided to make a special breakfast. When Emily walked into the kitchen, Julia had just finished making blueberry pancakes. "Wow, it smells amazing!" Emily exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "Good morning, Emily. Since you enjoyed making cookies yesterday, how about we make breakfast together today?" Excited, Emily agreed, and they began setting the table together. When Grace arrived, Eleanor also joined them, and the four enjoyed a delightful breakfast time. After the meal, Julia pulled Emily aside. "Do you realize how much richer our lives have become since you came here?" she asked. Emily nodded shyly. Julia continued. "I spoke with Child Welfare Services yesterday. We can start the process to officially foster you, if that's what you want." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? Can I continue to live here?" Julia smiled warmly. "Yes, if you want to. But there's no rush to decide." Suddenly, Emily hugged Julia tightly. "I don't need to think about it. I want to stay here. With you and Grandma Eleanor." Julia felt overwhelmed with emotion. She stroked Emily's hair and said, "Then, from now on, we're family." Julia and Emily shared a look and a soft smile. That afternoon, they gathered in the kitchen again, this time to make Eleanor's favorite apple pie. As Eleanor shared old memories, teaching them the steps, Julia marveled anew at the mysterious power of cooking to revive her mother's memories. As the evening approached and the scent of fresh apple pie filled the house, Julia looked around at her family, filled with happiness. Emily and Eleanor were exchanging smiles and conversation, with Grace watching over them peacefully. Julia reflected on how life can take unexpected turns, sometimes bringing the most beautiful gifts. The encounter with Emily and the resurgence of her mother's vigor through cooking had given her life new meaning and purpose. That night, as Julia lay in bed, her heart swelled with anticipation for the future, confident that the days ahead would be filled with cooking, love, and warm family moments. She pledged to create new memories with Emily and her mother, cherishing the old ones. A new chapter in Julia's life was beginning. Though it arrived in an unexpected way, she welcomed this change from the bottom of her heart. The power of love and compassion, along with the magic of cooking, would continue to heal and bind her family together. With this assurance, Julia drifted into a peaceful sleep. Weeks passed, and Julia, Emily, and Eleanor settled into their new life together. Emily started attending the local elementary school and spent her afternoons with Eleanor. Remarkably, Eleanor's condition stabilized and even showed signs of improvement. As time quietly flowed, subtle yet undeniable changes began to appear in Eleanor. It was like the first sprouts signaling the arrival of spring, modest yet filled with hope. Julia noticed these changes in the everyday moments. During morning coffee, Eleanor vividly recalled the previous day's events. At dusk, the time she spent with Emily gradually extended. Above all, Julia could see the light in Eleanor's eyes growing stronger day by day. Notably, Eleanor's speech had transformed. Previously fragmented and confused conversations were now coherent narratives. She beautifully intertwined distant memories with present events, as if weaving them together with delicate threads. One morning at breakfast, Eleanor suddenly said, "Julia, do you remember the cake you made on your 5th birthday?" She then recounted that day's events as if they had happened yesterday. Julia was both surprised and delighted by her mother's returning memory. However, the improvement was not linear. There were good days and days filled with confusion and disorientation. Yet, the overall trend showed that Eleanor's condition was indeed improving. Doctors were also astonished by this unexpected progress. During routine checkups, they were amazed at the results of Eleanor's cognitive tests. The scores had significantly increased, especially in areas of memory and language abilities. This change wasn't just about Eleanor's cognitive functions. Her overall quality of life improved. She enjoyed meals more, slept better at night, and most importantly, her smiles became more frequent. Julia quietly observed these miraculous changes with a sense of reverence. It might have been something beyond medical explanation, showcasing the power of love and hope. Emily's presence, the family bond, and the rekindling of memories through cooking had all intertwined to breathe new life into Eleanor. Yet, Julia cautiously avoided becoming overly optimistic. She understood that Alzheimer's progression couldn't be completely halted. Nevertheless, she resolved to cherish these moments with her mother as precious time together. Eleanor's improvement brought new hope and vitality to the entire family. It was like a ray of light piercing through darkness, adding a warm glow to their lives. Each day, they felt profound gratitude for this unexpected blessing. One afternoon, when Julia returned from work, she heard laughter coming from the kitchen. There, Emily and Eleanor were cooking clam chowder together. Eleanor was teaching Emily a secret recipe she had learned in Cape Cod during her youth. "Julia, look!" Emily exclaimed excitedly. "Grandma Eleanor is teaching me how to make clam chowder." Julia was speechless with surprise and joy. Seeing her mother regain past memories through cooking and passing them on to Emily felt like witnessing a miracle. "Mom, it's amazing," Julia said emotionally. "I haven't made this recipe in years. I love your clam chowder, so I'm really happy." Eleanor smiled gently. "That's right. And Tom loved my clam chowder too. It's sad that he can't eat it anymore." "Mom, you remembered Dad?" Julia exclaimed, surprised to hear Eleanor mention Tom's name after so long. It seemed she also understood that Tom had passed away. "What are you talking about?" "Of course, he's my beloved husband for life, even if he's gone far away," Eleanor said with a puzzled smile. "Yes, sorry. We just haven't talked about Dad much lately." "That might be true. I've felt like my mind has been clouded a lot. But recently, I feel much clearer. Cooking must have helped awaken my memory. The aromas, the flavors, and the time spent with loved ones. They've all helped open my heart." That night, as the family sat around enjoying the clam chowder, Julia felt deeply content. The following week, she found a flyer at the local community center for an intergenerational cooking class, where elderly people and children could learn to cook together. "This is perfect for us, isn't it?" Julia proposed to her family. "Emily, Mom, do you want to join with me?" Emily immediately agreed, and Eleanor also showed interest. At the first class, Julia witnessed something astonishing. Eleanor confidently stepped forward and began teaching the other participants how to make clam chowder. Her eyes sparkled, and her voice was strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, the secret to traditional Cape Cod clam chowder is using fresh clams and real cream." Participants eagerly took notes and asked questions. Emily looked up at her grandmother with pride, occasionally helping as an assistant. After the class, the organizer approached Julia. "Ms. Lawrence, I'm impressed by your mother's knowledge and passion. Could she perhaps conduct these classes regularly?" Julia responded with surprise and happiness. "Of course, I'll check with her. I think she'd be delighted." On the drive home, Eleanor was excited. "Julia, I haven't had this much fun in a long time. Connecting with people through cooking might have been the meaning of my life. Emily chimed in from the back seat. Grandma Eleanor, you were so cool. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Julia's heart was full of emotion. She realized anew that cooking was more than just preparing meals. It had the power to evoke memories, connect generations, and bring people together. Months passed, and Julia's home became the center of the local culinary community. Eleanor's cooking classes became very popular, attracting people of all ages every Saturday. Emily also participated actively, improving her skills as Eleanor's assistant. One day, a local newspaper came to cover this unique intergenerational cooking class. The reporter was particularly interested in Eleanor's transformation. Eleanor, could you tell us about the changes you've experienced since being diagnosed with Alzheimer's? The reporter asked. Eleanor, squinting as if to pull from distant memories, began to speak softly. After the diagnosis, it felt like the world was enveloped in fog. But when I stand in the kitchen, somehow my memories return. A sense of nostalgia filled her eyes. The aromas and flavors bring back lost times. Every day is a series of small discoveries. Through cooking, the light within me has gradually returned. Her words were imbued with deep gratitude and quiet joy. When the article was published, even more people began to attend the cooking classes, including those who had family members with Alzheimer's. They were seeking hope from Eleanor's experiences. Julia was amazed yet delighted by this unexpected development. She began collaborating with local healthcare professionals to discuss the potential of culinary therapy. Emily also gained recognition at school. Her culinary knowledge and skills impressed her classmates and were highly regarded by her home economics teacher. Emily, your baking is professional grade, the teacher praised. Have you considered becoming a chef in the future? Emily answered proudly. I don't know yet, but I'd like to make people happy with my cooking, just like Grandma Eleanor. One day, Julia returned from work to find Emily running towards her excitedly. Julia, something terrible has happened. Grandma Eleanor collapsed. Julia hurried to the living room, where Grace was taking care of Eleanor. Fortunately, it seemed not to be serious, but Eleanor appeared visibly exhausted. According to the doctor, Eleanor had been overdoing it. The preparation and execution of the cooking classes had drained much of her energy. Julia was conflicted. How could she balance her mother's health with the new sense of purpose Eleanor had found? That night, the family held a discussion. Mom, please don't overexert yourself, Julia said worriedly. Eleanor responded with a hint of sadness. But the cooking classes are my reason for living. I can't just stop. That's when Emily suggested. Grandma Eleanor, can't we help in some way? Maybe we could reduce the number of classes and instead work on a cookbook? Julia and Eleanor exchanged surprised looks. It was a brilliant idea. Yes, Emily. Julia smiled. Let's create a family cookbook together. We can document all of Grandma Eleanor's culinary wisdom and share it with many people. Eleanor's eyes lit up. That's a wonderful idea. I want to write down all my precious recipes before my memories fade. Thus, a new project began. The three of them gathered in the kitchen on weekends, recreating Eleanor's memorable dishes and documenting the recipes. Emily took charge of photography, and Julia compiled the text. This project became more than just creating a cookbook. It deepened the family bonds and allowed Eleanor to pass on not just her cooking skills but also life wisdom to her granddaughter. Emily, it's not about making perfect dishes. It's about cooking with love and sharing happiness with those who eat it. That's the best seasoning, Eleanor taught. Julia watched the relationship between mother and daughter deepen and was reminded of the importance of enjoying cooking amidst her busy work schedule. The cookbook project resonated far beyond expectations. When they held a book signing at a local bookstore, many people came, moved by the three generations' culinary wisdom. Part of the book's proceeds was donated to Alzheimer's research, a cause close to their hearts. Julia and her family were profoundly happy that their experiences could benefit others. Following the success of the cookbook, Julia's family was approached by a local community college to offer a course on cooking and health, exploring the potential of culinary activities to prevent dementia. Julia proposed excitedly. "Mom, Emily, how about we handle this course together?" Eleanor hesitated initially, but Emily immediately agreed. "Let's do it. I'm good at speaking in front of others, and I can be Grandma Eleanor's assistant." Eventually, they all agreed to take on the course. Julia managed the overall direction and theoretical parts, Eleanor led the practical cooking instruction, and Emily provided assistance and a youthful perspective. The course was a huge success, attracting participants from teenagers to those in their 80s, all eager to learn cooking skills and engage in intergenerational interaction. Particularly notable was the change in participants with early symptoms of dementia. They rekindled old memories through cooking and learned new skills, their expressions becoming more vibrant. After one session, an octogenarian named Martha approached Julia tearfully. "Julia, this course has changed my life. I've been feeling down because of my increasing forgetfulness, but cooking here has brought back so many wonderful memories. And I've made new friends." Julia was deeply moved. Her family's experiences were positively impacting others' lives. Eleanor remained stable, with days of remarkable lucidity. One day, she quietly said to Julia, "Julia, my memories might completely fade away someday, but this experience through cooking has given new meaning to my life. And it will continue through Emily to the next generation. There's no greater happiness than this." Julia hugged her mother, holding back tears, realizing how unpredictable yet beautiful life can be. Their family activities soon garnered national attention. They had the opportunity to appear in a documentary program focused on cooking, health, and intergenerational exchange. On the day of filming, Julia was a bit nervous, but Emily and Eleanor were enjoying themselves. The sight of the three generations cooking together warmed the hearts of viewers. After the broadcast, feedback poured in from across the country. Families in similar situations sent letters of gratitude, and new research projects reached out for their participation. Julia was amazed and delighted by how their small efforts had unexpectedly created significant ripples. She resolved to continue touching people's hearts through cooking with her family, embracing life's unexpected turns rather than fearing them. Subsequently, they received exciting news. A local hospital proposed a special cooking program for patients and their families, aimed at enhancing nutritional support and promoting family communication through cooking. The family eagerly engaged in this new challenge, collaborating with hospital dietitians to develop menus tailored to patients' conditions. They regularly held workshops where patients and their families could enjoy cooking together. This program significantly boosted the patient's motivation for recovery and strengthened family bonds, especially providing a significant morale boost for children in long-term hospitalization. Emily was particularly devoted to this program. She bonded with fellow patients of her age, listening to their concerns and hopes, and through these experiences, she developed a future aspiration. Julia, Grandma Eleanor. One day, Emily said earnestly, "I've decided. I want to become a doctor and incorporate culinary therapy into my practice." Julia and Eleanor were moved by Emily's growth and determination, deeply joyful that their small family's experiences would continue into the next generation in this way. As time passed, Emily became a high school student. Her dream was steadily taking shape. She was studying hard, aiming for medical school while actively participating in the hospital program. One day, a local high school invited them to give a special lecture on intergenerational exchange and healthy eating. They gladly accepted. On the day of the lecture, the classroom was packed with students. Julia began. "Today, we three generations will talk about how cooking enriches life and connects generations." Eleanor shared her experience with Alzheimer's and how cooking helped her regain her memories and joy of living. "Cooking is more than just preparing food," she said gently. "It's an expression of love, a keeper of memories, and a bridge between generations." Emily, from her perspective as the younger generation, spoke next. Through cooking, I've learned about my family's history, acquired new skills, and most importantly, the importance of connecting with people. She continued passionately. And now, I'm using this experience as I pursue a career in medicine. After the lecture, many students approached them with questions and shared their family issues. Julia and her family responded thoughtfully to each student. To deepen family bonds, why not start with small things? Julia advised. For example, try setting aside time to cook together once a week. This lecture led to the founding of an intergenerational cooking club at the school, becoming hugely popular as a place for students to learn cooking with their grandparents and local elders. Emily played a key role in launching this club, displaying her leadership among her peers. She passionately conveyed the importance of engaging with older generations. They have life experiences and wisdom that we can hardly imagine. She told her friends. Listening to their stories through cooking is like traveling in a time machine to the past. This club activity significantly impacted the community, gradually erasing generational barriers and fostering a spirit of mutual understanding and respect. One day, Emily came home excitedly. "Julia, Grandma Eleanor. Great news," she said breathlessly. "Our activities have been recognized, and we've been selected as a model case for a national generational food education program." The family was overjoyed by this news, never imagining their small efforts would have such a large impact. People from all over the country came to learn from their activities, and Julia, Eleanor, and Emily generously shared their experiences and knowledge. Later, Emily successfully navigated her high school years and was about to graduate. On her graduation day, Julia and Eleanor sat proudly in the audience as Emily, chosen as the class representative, began her speech. "Today, we are about to start a new chapter in our lives. But I stand here because of a serendipitous encounter with two incredible women." She smiled at Julia and Eleanor in the audience. "Years ago, I was just a little girl who was lost, but Julia and Grandma Eleanor took me in as family. They taught me about love, compassion, and life's wisdom through cooking." The hall fell silent, listening intently to her words. Our family's experience has taught us that unexpected events can sometimes bring the greatest gifts of life, and how important it is to cherish the bonds across generations. Emily took a deep breath and continued. "So, my classmates, believe that you have the strength to overcome any difficulties you face and value the conversations with people from different generations. Their experiences will undoubtedly enrich your lives." After the speech, the hall erupted into a round of applause. Many people were moved to tears. After the graduation ceremony, Julia, Eleanor, and Emily took a family photo. The three generations of women hugged each other, their faces brimming with joy and pride. That night, the family prepared a special dinner. The appetizer featured Eleanor's clam chowder with a fragrant truffle oil accent suggested by Emily. The main dish was a roast turkey, based on Eleanor's secret recipe, finished with a cranberry and orange glaze devised by Emily, and the side dishes included Eleanor's traditional green bean casserole alongside Emily's addition of a quinoa and roasted seasonal vegetable salad. For dessert, Eleanor's nostalgic lemon meringue pie was modernized by Emily with a hint of lavender. Thus, the table was laden with dishes that blended Eleanor's traditional recipes with Emily's contemporary twists. As the enjoyable meal drew to a close, Emily began to speak, slightly nervous. "I have something to tell you both." She took a deep breath and continued. "I've been accepted to medical school. And I want to specialize in culinary therapy." Julia's eyes sparkled with joy. "Emily, that's wonderful." Eleanor gently squeezed Emily's hand and smiled. "You will surely be able to help many people." Emily looked at them both with gratitude. "It's all thanks to you too. Without this family, I could never have found such a dream." After a brief silence, Julia quietly started speaking. "I've decided too. From now on, I'll dedicate myself to our program at the hospital. I want to share our experiences with more people. Eleanor, moved by her daughter's resolve, nodded. Then, with a bit of hesitation, she shared her own thoughts. I also want to continue bringing joy to people through cooking as long as I can. Even if my memory fades, the joy of cooking is something I won't forget. The three looked at each other, exchanging wordless understanding and affection. Emily's youthful determination, Julia's warm devotion, and Eleanor's quiet courage all softly resonated with each other. After dinner, under a starlit sky, the three sat on the front porch listening to the sound of the waves. Emily, today somehow reminds me of the day we met, Julia said reflectively, and as Eleanor nodded, Emily took both their hands. Thanks to you too, I've found my calling. Now, I'll combine medicine and cooking to help many people. Go for it, Emily. Your wonderful story is just beginning, Julia said, while Eleanor smiled. Yes. Keep bringing light to many people's lives. Emily, excited, added. Yes. I'll do my best. We'll share our experiences with people all over the world. I'm sure it will change someone's life. In that moment, they felt truly content. Who could have imagined that such a beautiful story would unfold from an unexpected meeting? And so, they proved that the simple act of cooking can transcend generations, connect hearts, and bring healing and hope. Julia, Eleanor, and Emily's bond will continue to inspire courage and hope in many. Their story teaches us that love, compassion, and the power of cooking can overcome any adversity.